welcome to the special episode of Amari Purple Talk, a podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, the Amari in Amari Communications, and today I'm going to share my thoughts on the first 4 Prince albums originally released on Warner Brothers at the beginning of his career that have been recently reissued by the Prince Estate and Sony Legacy. These reissues consist of 12 albums reissued by Sony Legacy on February 4th of 2022. These reissues cover the majority of Prince albums released during his classic Warner Brothers period. Absent from this round of reissues are the movie soundtracks Purple Rain, Parade, Batman, and Graffiti Bridge. Also absent are Diamonds and Pearls, which is rumored to get a super deluxe release as early as this year, hopefully. Also absent is the Love Symbol album. And also missing is the Gold Experience, which will get a vinyl re-release or vinyl reissue on June 18th as part of the second round of Record Store Day. Also getting a wider release the day before will be the CD version of the Gold Experience, which would be June 17th. So be on the lookout for that. It'll be a good weekend for the Gold Experience this summer. Now, these reissues have not been remastered, but I'll get into the sound quality in a minute. So sometimes remastered doesn't always mean it's better, but as I do more episodes on CD vinyl comparisons, especially when things have been remastered or remixed or whatever form they're in, then we'll get more into the details of a remaster versus a reissue and so on and so forth. Now, basically, my reasons for getting the first 4 albums, mainly to, as far as those albums go, to start to replace, as far as my vinyl, replace the kind of worn out, I've played them to death, worn the grooves off of a lot of them. I mean, they still can play, but given that these are released on both CD and vinyl, I chose to get the CD first, because upon hearing that Prince got his master tapes back in 2014, kind of similar to what I did with the Beatles, I had all the original 1987 CD versions of those albums, but when I heard that they were getting a remaster release in 2009, I just went and sold them all off. And the same goes for Prince. When I heard he got his masters back in 2014, then I kind of sold them off because the sound quality wasn't so great. So I knew, like, okay, they're going to reissue this stuff and I'm just going to get those because the sound quality would be better. Although Warner Brothers did not release any CDs that have been remastered, or did they reissue much of anything, they did reissue his albums on vinyl. And they kind of had a good thing going until the whole thing with the Prince Estate and Sony getting the license, Warner Brothers exercising a clause in a contract that they signed with Prince before he passed away, letting those rights expire. So now here we are in 2022, and Sony has the licensing to reissue everything, Warner Brothers Classic Era, as well as everything done when Prince left Warner Brothers. So here we are. So I basically wanted to, again, kind of fill the gaps of my CD collection to start off. Eventually, I will get the vinyl for this round of reissues, again to replace my older vinyl, and just to kind of relive the nostalgia. I kind of wanted to revisit and not necessarily kind of pick up on, is the sound quality better? Do I want to pick up any nuances? Again, get into that a little bit later. But I just kind of wanted to see if I could go back, back to when I first heard Soft and Wet back in 1978. When I was absorbing the second Prince album after becoming a Prince fan with Dirty Mind. Because basically, once I heard Dirty Mind, the next one I heard after that was the second album. And then just within weeks to months later, Controversy first came out. So, there was a lot of catch up to Prince, within a span of the spring and summer going into fall of 1981. It was just a great time to become a fan of this man's music. So I kind of wanted to see if I could not necessarily recapture that, but kind of just go through a rediscovery process with it. Because, hey, since then, there's been 1999, there's been Sign of the Times, there's been the Gold Experience, there's been Emancipation, Artificial Age, so there's been so much Prince that has been part of the journey. It was nice to kind of revisit. So that's my motivation for picking up the first 4 albums. And eventually I'm going to get the rest. I'll probably go with 1999. I did get Around the World in a Day as part of ordering this because the vinyl on that is well worn and I no longer had my version on CD. So I just wanted to fill that gap immediately as well. But I'm going to cover that in part 2. So now let's move on to these first 4 Prince albums. And I'm going to start with, of course, obviously, For You. And my history with this, I didn't jump on board immediately in 1978. I remember about summer of 1978. And summers, hot summers, no central air, just windows and fans. And sometimes, a good night's sleep on some summer nights was hard to come by. But, I would have the radio on and just have it low so it didn't wake up anybody else in the house. I was 12 at the time. And at night, the DJ would have a block of, commercial free music. So it'd be about 4 or 5 songs. And then when you turn it on, you're in the middle of this 4 or 5 song block. And I remember always hearing Soft and Wet, but never knew who this guy was. Like they would never say the name because, he'd be 3rd and 4th in the rotation. And, they probably announced it earlier, And now coming up, we have Ohio Players, Heatwave, Prince, and I would miss all of that because I'm turning it on and it's in the middle of whatever record was playing before Soft and Wet. But I always liked it. I was like, damn, that is tight. So, again, fast forward Prince, fast forward Dirty Mind, playing catch up and getting a hold of this. And I always loved this album. I mean, the legacy behind this one, it's his first one. There's the whole mystique. At first they kind of pushed his age back a couple of years to make it seem like he was like 16, 17 or something. And when he was actually 18, 19 recording it, but still the youngest person not named Stevie Wonder to, write and produce their own record. So there's a lot of history with that, but it also gets ignored a lot as well. But I enjoy it. I mean, I love it. It brings back the 70s in a way that, any other album from the 70s that I've owned, or, memories of songs on the radio. This album can take me back to that. And as far as the reissue goes, again, there's nothing, no extensive liner notes, no lyrics, with the exception of the second album. The lyrics do come with that one. It's kind of a reproduction of the original vinyl as far as the liner notes, which is okay, because the first one, again, to capitalize on, this young cat writing and producing his own record, and the number of instruments that he plays on this, it's amazing. The vinyl versions kind of have a reasonable facsimile of the original vinyl. The only thing missing is the Warner Brothers logo on all of those. But, that's neither here nor there as far as the packaging on that. But this CD was probably the most surprising CD sound-wise. Because I remember the original CDs that were being pressed by Warner Brothers and owning those. And no matter what type of sound system you put it in, it just kind of had this low quality sound, and it didn't compare anywhere near the original vinyl as far as sound. But this, I was pleasantly surprised. Now, mind you, I put it onto a old Sony boombox, manufactured around probably somewhere early to mid 90s, and it has a equalizer on it. But I found, I used to have a Fisher and would play my original Prince CDs on those, and even with the equalizer, I would have to put the surround button on to, kind of do this fake remastered sound for it. But with this, I didn't have to do anything. Popped it in, and it has a very nice volume. And I think that would be the surprise to everyone picking up these reissues, first and foremost, is that there's a good quality to the volume. So you don't have to crank it up to hear it. This CD in particular, I did pick up some subtle nuances in some of the instrument layering on it. That's, it's not a remaster, but for not being a remaster, it's pretty darn good. And, I bought these from Amazon. So when you order from Amazon, you also get the auto rip, which immediately pops up in your Amazon Music. And listening even through earbuds on those, I mean, yeah, obviously you get some subtle nuances automatically with headphones, earbuds. But just listening on a regular sound system, this is pretty good, for not being a remaster. Definitely. So I would say definitely pick this one up if possible. Virtually every song on it matches my memories of the original vinyl from playing it back in the early 80s. And again, just those sounds of the late 70s, that he was in, he's in tune with his frequency on that, and was able to tap into that frequency of the times and still make it his own. But you put it on and it's 1978 all over again. And again, some added nuances with the instrumental layering that I've never noticed on any listening experience prior. So again, kudos to Sony's manufacturing or pressing or using their quality CD mastering, software to give it a pretty decent sound for not being a remaster. And from there, I'm going to move on to the second album, the self-titled Prince album. And this was an album I've always enjoyed. To me, it's almost with like volume 1 and volume 2, with both of these albums, because it was kind of more the same process. He's in a professional studio. The stakes are a lot higher because he went into over budget producing this one. Even though Soft and Wet was a hit, the album itself wasn't a major seller. So a lot was on the line with this one, and he delivered the goods with this album. But now, it's 79 and going into 80, so the end of one decade into another, the sounds are changing, disco is going, kind of fading off. Rick James was kind of on the top of his game at that time. Parliament Funkadelic was still going strong. So, this made a lot of noise. And it managed to even cross over a little bit into the pop charts, hence his classic appearance on American Bandstand. But with this reissue, it sounds great for not being a remaster. Especially for me, listening to Sexy Dancer all the way to the rest of the album. I hear, again, more subtle nuances in the layers, both the vocals, some of the instrument layering on the tracks. In a lot of cases, I want to say this is the best of the 4 reissues that I've heard so far. I would be curious as to what a future remaster would sound like in comparison with the original CDs or even the original vinyl. With that, the higher synth notes, vocals, and different sound effects. Possible exception, With You, the string arrangements with the synthesizers on With You gives me a much better appreciation for this song. This was a song, it was never one of my favorites of his early period. Even the Jill Jones remake didn't quite, sell me on the song itself. I even felt that she had better songs as B-sides or even vault stuff from the vault that we've heard later that would have been a much better substitute. But taking off my Prince fan hat and putting on the critical composer hat, then when I heard the string arrangements with the synthesizers on this, which I've never heard even from the original vinyl, even on the original CD, this gave me a better appreciation of the song. So again, whatever Sony's, mastering, pre-mastering, or whatever they did with the original tapes without having to do a full-on remaster, again, big thumbs up for the quality control on that one. And again, like I said, arguably it's the best of these 4 reissues. And I'll kind of get into why that may be in a moment. And we're actually going to start off with Dirty Mind. And again, this was my gateway record. This was the one that brought me into the world, the Prince musical singularity. I got pulled in, and this was the one that did it. Just the as opposed to the first 2 albums, which were pretty much, standard, Prince doing pop, Prince doing rock, Prince doing R&B, kind of being traditional, but yet still trying to make it his own. This is where he comes into his own as as, the artist that, we've grown to love and appreciate over the decades. And with this reissue, again, the sound is great. The drums and synth have much more of a punch, more of a rich sound. It does put me back in mind of the original vinyl. I'd be curious again. I mean, this may be hard to do as a remaster, but I would be curious if they do pull that off. Given that both For You and the Prince album were done in professional studios, a couple of them very legendary, the Record Plant in Sausalito, I think Hollywood Sound in Burbank for the second one, where Dirty Mind is kind of how we're accustomed to doing things nowadays. A lot of people still have state-of-the-art studios or go to the state-of-the-art studios, but nowadays mostly artists record at home. You got the computer set up. Well, here, Prince had a 16-track board in his home, and these were originally demos, but they weren't taken to a major studio for any type of remixing or any overdubs, because it would have ruined the feel of the songs that, the power and the intention of these songs. So I think it would be hard to do a remaster for this one. But I'd still be curious to see what they would do if they did. And again, if there's any vault tracks for special edition, or did he attempt to record some albums in a professional studio, got back and started demoing these tracks before deciding to just go all the way with the do-it-yourself approach with it. So again, but it's not a bad sound. Like I said, the synths and the drums, you want that punch, especially with some of the deeper bass keyboard riffs and that kind of, new wave drumming, whether it's acoustic drums or whether it's drum machines going on. You want that punch. And that's one of the things I loved about the original vinyl. Kind of one of the disappointments of the original CD. It just didn't have that punch and it didn't have that volume. But again, you put this on even just your regular sound system, and you won't have to crank the volume up to enjoy it. It can be at an even volume along with the rest. Now, streaming, you still may have some issue with the volume here and there, depending on what platform you're using. Although the majority of them are at minimum, you'll have the lossless audio. So it's at least up to about 16-bit. Other more high quality, you may be able to get 24-bit out of it, or it may have been, some of the albums may have been mastered for 24-bit at this stage. But, this, the streaming, you may have to just depending on your personal, streaming service. But as far as the CD, I would definitely recommend getting the CDs, and they'll be much better than your originals. I guarantee it. And this also brings us to controversy. And here we have a mixture of do-it-yourself home studio, as well as recording in a professional studio. So this one, I think you might still have some problems remastering some of the tracks, but I also think that some of the tracks may have started off as being done at home and then brought to the studio for additional overdubs and remixing. So, I think if you do a super deluxe reissue of this or remaster, I think you would have better luck with it than trying to do a Dirty Mind remaster at this point. But again, I love the sound on it. Don't have to crank up the volume. Again, the drums, the synths, that level of bass quality. You don't have to crank it up to hear it. It has that punch again to it. Reminds me of the original vinyl, especially Private Joy. Probably one of the best sounding tracks on this reissue. It's closer to my memories of the original vinyl. The Lindrum kick, great bass tone, great synth sounds. Probably the second best sounding track on this reissue is Annie Christian. Because again, I like the track from the original vinyl back when I got it in 81. And, it just kind of, I don't know, over the years, as more and more Prince songs come into play, kind of got lost in the shuffle. But listening to this reissue, it brought it back like, oh yeah, I forgot how great this track was. Or how much I enjoyed the track. So again, kudos to Sony for their quality control as far as getting the sound out. Now we'll get into some other quality control issues in just a moment, so stay tuned. But this is another one I'm anxious to hear as a remaster. Again, like I said, this is done at home, but probably either some of the tracks were taken to the studio for overdubs and remixing. Some of the songs may have been created actually in a professional studio. Some were mixed and overdubbed at Hollywood Sound and at Sunset Sound, beginning of that legendary run of classic Prince tracks recorded at that studio. This was the first one. So again, great sounding. Recommend you pick it up. And that is it for the first four. Now, your reasons to buy it or not buy it. I would say, as far as controversy, and one other album that wasn't discussed in this episode, but we'll get to in another episode, is the Come album. And I'll start with controversy. There is a typo that most fans picked up on. Now, as Prince fans, we all know what the last track of the album is. I don't know if I can say it on air, and I don't know if I can be able to say it on air and not get yanked off of YouTube. So for the sake of that, we'll just show it there. So we all know what the last song on the album is, but if you notice, I don't know if you can see that. No glare from the light there, but long story short, Get You Off is not the name of the song that's on the album, folks. They got it right as far as pressing it on the CD and the cover, but the liner notes, big typo. Second typo is the Come album. Let's see. So, the Come album, Prince's first sort of salvo in the war with Warner Brothers, where he was no longer Prince, but the unpronounceable symbol. And marking that occasion was this album, in which he has a facsimile of his obituary announcing that, Prince no longer existed. Long live the new power generation. So it has his birth year of 1958 and the year in which he changed his name from Prince to an unpronounceable symbol, 1993. So if you get the reissue, of course, it's right on the cover. And it'll also be right on the CD. But when you purchase the reissue, in the sort of the kind of the spine here of the CD, when you get that, it's going to say 1993, or excuse me, 1953 to 1993. And yeah, that's kind of not a good look for Warner Brothers. Not a good look for Sony on that one. Not a good look at all. Now, my thought on this is going to be that in 50 years' time, people are going to pay big bucks just to have that CD pressing with the typo. Because I'm hoping the next round of pressings, they'll correct it. That being said, if Controversy and the Come album are amongst your favorites or your top 5, top 10, and you definitely want the reissues, I would hold out until they correct the typos. That's, if you're a completist. Or get them, wait until they have the next round of pressings with the corrections. Get that too. Hold on to them. 50 years time, somebody's going to want to pay big bucks for it. And, you might want to put your kids through school or something, or you might want to treat yourself to a vacation. Just keep that in the plastic and make your money with it. But for the rest of them, they're not bad. I think this isn't necessarily for the deep dive Prince fan. I think they're designed more for the sort of mainstream buyer that may have had at least one or a few of these albums in their collection. May not be diehard Prince fans, but just enjoyed what they heard on those and liked them amongst other artists that they collect. And this kind of gives them a chance to have a good quality CD or an access to a good quality CD. I feel that down the line, especially as things with the estate settle, now that the courts have recognized the family members fully, the tax dispute has been settled, the money can now start going into the hands of the family. You have the insertion of the company Primary Wave that bought entire shares or partial shares of some of the other family members. If they can all agree on a particular product moving forward, then I think you will see quality remastered editions of these albums down the road. But for right now, because there has always been sort of inferior product in regards to Prince's Warner Brothers era, again, this gives the mainstream a chance to go to where they buy albums, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Target. Now, your mom and pop record stores, 9 times out of 10, if there's Prince albums from the Warner Brothers era, they're used copies anyway. They're not brand new. And not everybody has access to a mom and pop record store Or like I said, some people just like to shop at Target or Walmart, or if they're ordering on Amazon, they want a brand new in the shrink wrap CD. And this gives those listeners, those sort of music fans, not necessarily Prince fans, but music fans, that opportunity to either have these albums back in their collection, or if it was something that they had missed out on originally, now they have access to it. So that's pretty much my thought on the reissues. Again, I always wanted to start with the CD versions. Eventually, I will make my way towards the vinyl versions. Again, before Prince passed, he signed off on Warner Brothers reissuing those classic albums on vinyl first. And from there, I was able to get Purple Rain, Sign of the Times, and Parade. So I have the 2015 reissues of those. But now that Warner Brothers no longer has the license, except for Parade, they still have the license to Parade, and Purple Rain also. But I feel that with the Sony reissues of these classic albums, again, I kind of want to replace my worn vinyl, and I'll eventually get those. I'll also do sort of CD vinyl comparisons as I get the vinyl. Same thing with some of the other reissues like 1999, Around the World in a Day, Love Sexy, let's see. I think Love Sexy and Come don't have a vinyl version on those. But whatever vinyl CD versions exist, I will do comparisons on those as I get them. But what do you think? That's the most important part. What do you think of these reissues? Was it something that you were looking forward to? Were you one of those that, don't really not necessarily like the classic era, but you're more of a fan of the 90s era, which you are, some of these are sort of 90s included. You do have the Come album, Vault, Old Friends for Sale. Gold Experience is coming. So you do have some 90s stuff. Do you think they should have waited until they've done like a full remaster and just did a reissue campaign, both vinyl and CD, for remasters? Or do you agree that this kind of gives more mainstream listeners a chance to have, replace old, worn out copies of their versions? Or do you think this is great for new fans? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And this is going to end this episode. Thanks once again for tuning in. And please download the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. But for YouTube listeners, please hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and that way you'll stay up to date on everything Amari Communications. Once again, I'm Richard Cole, and until next time, create your day and create your life. Peace.